Thanks all for joining. You can see the numbers going up, so we'll just give it a minute. Right, I think we'll crack on. So, hi everyone, and welcome to another AST virtual event. I don't know how many we've done. There's been about kind of maybe 16 or so. So we are looking forward to this one. We've of course got Henry Windsor back, who was our first guest. And I think we have had some new members join us, a few from overseas, and they're on the event. So welcome to you all. And thank you we were delayed a few minutes. We sent a quick note round. We knew people would want to sort of pay their respects at 8 p.m. and stuff like that. So as usual, same sort of rules. I think you know the drill by now. If you want to tweet out, feel free. AST event is the hashtag. If you want to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand. We'll bring you in. We always like to have some interaction, but obviously, no one don't have to if you don't feel confident. There's a Q&A feature, which obviously you're welcome to kind of use as well. And we'll try and answer those questions as and when we can with either Tim or Henry. So gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna welcome Tim to join.
Good evening.
Good evening. God, we all need haircuts, don't we? God, I'm glad I'm not the only one. So Tim, just a few things I know we're all working on, which I think we should probably update everyone on. So return of fans, what's going on there?
Well, there's been some more news from the government. So we know that on the 15th of May, they will allow 20,000 fans into the FA Cup final. Where that will be interesting and perhaps slightly confusing in the messaging is those fans will not be socially distanced. They will deliberately be put in together because that will be testing the arrangements from June the 23rd, when we hope that much fuller crowds will be allowed, and that will benefit potentially the Euros at Wembley. So that's 20,000. And the way that will work is everybody entering will go through some kind of COVID certification process. They've either had the vaccination or they have had a lateral test in the 48 hours before going in to show that they do not have COVID. And that is what life will look like. I would have thought the first game at the Emirates might be the Emirates Cup or friendlies that are played in July, because we wouldn't expect Arsenal to probably find an overseas tour this summer. In terms of returning to the Emirates, the government will allow up to 10,000 in the larger stadiums from the 17th of May, which would allow Arsenal fans to return for the game against Brighton. The issue at the moment is Premier League clubs are having a debate amongst themselves about whether it's fair to allow one set of teams, the teams that play in game week 38, to play at home with fans when others don't get an equal opportunity. And I think there is some debate about whether the fixture scheduled for the 17th of May, which for us is away at Crystal Palace, could move back to midweek. So it could go back to like the 20th of May to allow Palace to have fans in. That's not decided yet. And you might want to ask our next guest, Henry, what he's heard is the latest or what might be happening there. I would have my fingers crossed that about 10,000 Arsenal fans will be able to go to the Arsenal-Brighton game, and everybody who was registered for the ballot will still be in the ballot, and it will probably give you a slightly more than 50% chance of going. So let's hope that we're all together again in the not too distant future.
There was a question we had in about the data amnesty, and I know you've kind of been talking about COVID rules and things like that, but it's important people do fill out their details and stuff like that, isn't it?
It is one of the reasons. I mean, I think there's some commercial reasons behind it as well, but there's going to be much stricter arrangements for quite a long time, I think for years to come, of knowing who is in the stadium so you can be traced if there are subsequent outbreaks, and that's why it must be filled in. And certainly I think one of the message for everybody here is if you aren't changing your details in this sort of update that Arsenal sent to you, you still need to click in and sort of register that you're updating the same details. because otherwise the system is showing you that you haven't registered. So do look out from the email from Arsenal, and do log in and verify yourself, even if it's not to change anything.
I think there's an option for no changes. So yeah, make sure you do that. And then European leagues, Tim, obviously there's been a bit of noise about European kind of reforms and things like that. What's kind of the latest there? And obviously we're working closely with the FSA and co.
We're working very closely with Football Supporters Europe and the FSA, and I would recommend to people, if you're interested in this subject, both of their websites have some good explanation of the campaign work and the threat that is posed. Probably the main decisions are going to be taken at a UEFA level over the next 4 weeks, either at their ExCo or at a meeting that they'll have just before the Euros start. It does look like certain things are definitely happening. They will expand the Champions League from 32 to 36. They will stop using group stages early on and move to what's called a Swiss league. That's where all 36 teams are in the same league. You only play 8 games or 10 games on a seeded basis, and a league table is produced out of that. One of the debates is whether you play 6 games, 8 games, or 10 games before the league table is decided. And the league table gives you who goes through to the knockout rounds. Because they want a lot more football here to try and make a lot more money, the top 8 teams will go through to the knockout stages. Then the next 16 will go through to play a knockout against each other to then join the final 16. So one of the concerns is this will be too much football, not enough jeopardy in it, and further making the rich clubs even richer by giving them more fixtures. So there's a big push to only play 8 games rather than 10 games in that stage. Another thing that will concern us all, I've been reading some very good stuff from Henry on this, I'm sure he'll expand, but perhaps the worst idea of all is that these 4 extra places in the Champions League, some of them will be given to clubs based on their European historic performance. So perhaps the best way to illustrate that is, if it were in place, Liverpool could come 6th or 7th this season and be given a place ahead of Leicester because they have a better European historic performance. We've very much, as the AST, joined forces with the other support groups to say qualification must be on the merit of what you achieve in the season of trying to get in. Otherwise, you've created franchised football or a Super League. And there will be more debate after that about how the money is shared around, which is very important because you don't want to see one-sided games because you're letting the rich get richer. And it's been interesting watching the round of 16 knockout of the Champions League, which started really well with Porto Juventus, which was a great game because it had jeopardy and was end-to-end. But then pretty much every game after that was one-sided and didn't really have anything to watch in the second leg as they moved on. And the UEFA have got to, in our view, be really careful to keep the competitive balance. But that's enough on that. It'd be interesting to hear Henry's views of what he thinks is happening. But do look at our newsletters or look at the FSA website for a good update on everything that's happening.
If there's anything we know about, it's a 4th place finish on the final day of the season. God, those were the days. Very quickly, we sent out the results for our gambling survey. Is there anything you want to sort of add there?
Just thank you everyone for filling that in. That showed that 2/3 of you were concerned about the relationship between football and gambling companies and felt that there should be stricter regulation from the government. It's interesting that I've seen one national opinion poll survey done, and I think that it was within 2 percentage points the same result of feedback. But we put the results in on our website, and there's a link to those in the last newsletter. We will submit those to the Department for Culture, Media and Sport review of gambling, which closes at the end of the month, and then an ongoing consideration by government of what they will do. I'll also say that Arsenal are aware of this issue and say they recognise the importance of being socially responsible, and they are trying to follow some code of conducts and make sure that they don't do social media that appeals to young people, doesn't include the odds in the messaging. The partnership is going to be there. They're paid quite a lot of money for it, but they do say that they are trying to do it as socially responsibly as possible.
Yeah, which they absolutely should be doing. So that's good to hear. Right, Tim, maybe hear from you again later. I'm going to let you go. I'm going to bring in our main guest for the evening, Mr. Henry Winter. Henry, yeah, that's it. You press the right button. Now you can just not touch anything. It's great. Just make sure you have your charger plugged in.
Hi, Akmal. Hi, Tim. Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me.
I laugh and I say that because it was actually Gary Lewin we had on, who obviously you will know well, and his laptop died about probably 5 minutes to go, but it died because he didn't realise it was on 0%. So, got to say this sort of stuff. But Henry, how are you?
I am good. I am I think about my Wembley on Thursday will be, I think it's my 140th game behind closed doors. And just listening to you and Tim talking there and, exchanging messages with fans on social media, if the government, the Premier League, the EFL, the clubs, PFA, LMA, and fans organisations like yourself and the FSA don't start before the start of the season and actually get together and say this pandemic has to be the point for a reset. For a reset in terms of the appreciation of fans. This is something that I've long felt, but it's absolutely been highlighted going in game after game, talking to Stuart. So I've been to probably about 8 Arsenal games in the last couple of months or 3 months going into the ground. And you see the stewards there and they're just desperate to see fans back because, you're not simply, I know there's been a shift moving from Highbury to the Emirates, and it hasn't maybe necessarily got that intimacy, the family feel, new fans coming in and all that. But talking to the stewards who were there, talking to the staff who were there, they are so missing fans. I mean, really, it's like they're almost in mourning. And I think it's absolutely shown to clubs, it's shown to players. If I talk to players, they are so missing fans, and not simply the home fans. I talk to Jack Grealish occasionally, and he says, I miss the whole team because they inspire me. He said, I also miss the away fans because they're having a pop at me and I thrive on that. Players are just so missing. And fair play to the Arsenal players and all the players for managing to maintain their intensity in just in an echo chamber. But I think that the people who are also realising it are the broadcasters. The broadcasters, without it, whether you're listening on the radio, whether you're watching on television, the fact it's completely soulless when there's no sound. I know they try and sort of ramp it up with their sort of fake crowd sound, which I absolutely hate. I think it's cheating. I think it's pretending that the country isn't in crisis, that the sport isn't in crisis. I think we have to face that. And I just hope that at the start of next season, that there is a reset in terms of support for fans. I've talked to government about this. I've talked to the Premier League about this. But now is the time that this moment has to be seized. So there is, whether it's 20's plenty, whether it's the price of tickets, whether it's moving kickoff times at the short notice when all you lot have sort of booked your trains. And I mean, I get the last train out of King's Cross. I live near Peterborough. And I get the 23:32, the last train out of King's Cross North. And a lot of fans get on that, if Geordie fans, they drive to Leeds, they get on that train or they get the train back. I mean, it's a fairly grim train at times. It's known as the Vomit Comet. But you know what? If a game is so slightly late, or delayed or whatever, and VAR, it adds another 5 minutes onto the game still, or VAR, it's an absolute pain if you're booked on that train. So absolutely, fans have got to be properly supported after this last 14 months, which has been pretty grim without fans.
Well said. I mean, there's a few comments that have come in. For me, I was just listening to that and I couldn't disagree with any of it. I mean, I think for a while, I think fans have always thought people take us for granted a little bit. You could argue that we should be paid to go and because we make the product what it is. And I think people are seeing that now, actually, that it is not the same without fans.
Totally, completely agree, and particularly the overseas broadcasters. If I talk to some of the foreign reporters who are in the ground, and they still, allow particularly the television people in the ground, and I talk to them, they're just saying it's absolutely a nightmare just trying to sell this to an audience overseas without the supporters, because the fans, the fans overseas, wherever they are in the world, they're tuning in, whether they are, expat fans of Arsenal or whether they just want the drama of the Premier League. a lot of the drama of the Premier League is provided by the backdrop, by the noise, by the crowd, by that atmosphere, by the players bouncing off the crowd. You get the North London derby without support. I mean, it's just, look, it's a game. It's important. There's a jeopardy on it. The players give everything, but it's not quite right. You know, the Germans call them ghost games, and they're right.
Yeah. I know a lot of fans who've not, you know, of course they're interested and of course they're watching games, but they're not, I mean, Tim's one of them who always says, you always get a text from Tim at some point during a game just saying, I'm just not feeling this. It's just not, whereas I'm into the football and I'm into the tactical side and I'm loving everything, but I want to be there. But I'm sure there's lots like Tim who are just, you know, and we don't want to lose fans, I guess, as well, which is the other thing. But yeah.
I mean, the other thing is there's so much focus on mental health. And, you know, the government and the Premier League and the authorities are going to have to look at the mental health of fans because, you know, you've just been, it's like losing a limb. It's like being detached from your family. And it's interesting talking to some of the managers. And I went to see Nuno at Molineux the other day, and he says he finds it very, very difficult without fans and without being able to have that. Also, that he's such a tactile person. And a lot of managers are like this. Not sort of Mourinho so much, but a lot of them actually find it like Klopp. He just wants to go and embrace his players, and okay, he can do it a bit, but obviously there's social distancing. So, but if I have one plea to supporters, and whenever I talk to fans, I say, you've got to be more militant. This is your game. This doesn't belong to Kroenke. This doesn't belong to the Glazers. This doesn't belong to people scattered around the world. This is your game. And if, say, you know, horrendous thoughts, say hooliganism returns, who are going to be the people who are really standing up for the support, who are still coming in, even if the game doesn't become, you know, loses its fashionability or whatever. It's, you know, you are so important. You've really got to stand up now. I understand all the tribalism, but you've got to get together with Spurs fans, Liverpool fans, Manchester City fans, Manchester United fans, and stand together on this and actually say, come on, you've seen, to the authorities, you've seen how grim the game is without us. Let's have some of that television revenue that is being given to agents, given to players, and fair enough, you know, many of them are the stars of the show, but actually, let's have a little bit of respect back to the fans. Let's have ticket prices more sensible. So, look, so many issues. I don't need to tell you about the sort of, you know, the fans' gripes and the issues, but actually, let's show some more respect to the fans, and there has to be a reset come the start of next season.
We had a comment from Helen as well, who wanted us to thank you for kind of your support on the pay-per-view stuff. And actually, that's a good example of where fans did get together because, you know, we don't like to admit this, but we talk to the Spurs Supporter Trust weekly and actually we shared the same passion. And we all got together, we all made something happen and we got it changed.
But you can scream at Spurs supporters on match days. You know, you can have your issues with them on sort of social media as long as it's, you know, it doesn't sort of, there's no sort of added edge to it. But then you can march together shoulder to shoulder. I mean, I know you've done it before. Was it the Black Scarf movement that I got that right? You sort of joined up with the Liverpool fans. I think it was on ticket prices. Forgive me for not remembering. But the pay-per-view thing I thought was absolutely brilliant. I mean, I was talking to some Brighton fans last week, and they're, you know, even in a fairly affluent place like Brighton, they've got food banks there. You know, and all that money went into the food banks. And I think the fans have shown by not being in the stadium their importance, but also the work that you do with the community. You know, everyone has absolutely rallied. And I just think that, you know, a bit more respect for fans will be good. But you've got to be more militant. You've got to do it collectively.
Absolutely. And just on that, I mean, 55,000 was raised from Arsenal fans, close to 500,000 across the board from football fans. So it was an absolute tremendous effort. Talking about sort of return of fans, you know, we talked a little bit off air, and I think you asked us, what do we think will happen or should happen in the integrity question and stuff like that. Obviously, Tim talked about, you know, the last game falls after the restrictions open, or that set of restrictions, but games week 37 doesn't. What are you hearing, and what's your personal view on what should happen? Is the integrity an issue?
I think it is an issue. I think you could argue whether Steve Bruce actually wants Newcastle fans in the stadium at the moment, because they might turn on him and the team pretty quickly. But the fact that they've got to go down to Craven Cottage, there could be, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 fans. I mean, it's an interesting configuration with the Riverside stand being rebuilt. that is a huge issue. I think they either have it for the last 2 rounds of games, as Tim suggested, in terms of pushing one of those, or sort of delaying one of those, the penultimate weekend, or they don't do it at all. And I know some clubs have actually said it would be so much easier if they actually just waited until next season. Having said that, the grounds are ready. If I go into Arsenal's ground, I get tested. Everything is in place. If I go into the, where you sit, Ackle,
yeah.
At the back there, and that sort of concourse there, if I go into the men's loo there, it is all the signs are in place in terms of, where almost literally where you stand, and then the sinks where you normally have 4 sinks together, those are now all sort of, they've got some perspex between them, and everything is ready. The safest, I've had the jab and I get tested regularly, but the safest I feel is actually in a football ground, and they're ready for fans, and they need you back. But they've got to juggle this with government, because I completely agree with you. The jeopardy will be a huge issue.
Yeah, I was very jealous. There was a game when you took a picture of my seat and sent it to me, and I was at home just sitting there waiting for the game, because I'm not used to watching build-up, because I don't watch, so I'm just sitting there watching the pundits talk about something, and then that's when your picture popped up. And I got to say, that was the day I really did feel it. I think it might have been the Man United game, but
yeah, it was very strange going past your seat and not being asked about whether Aubameyang or should those all go.
Yeah, well, yeah, I like to keep you guys on your toes, sort of thing. Tim also mentioned about the European sort of reforms and stuff like that, with the European leagues and changing kind of the structure of the Champions League, Europa, all that kind of stuff. General views there. Is it, is there a ploy from Europe to weaken the Premier League because it is too powerful in their eyes?
Well, there's just too much football. At a time when there can be question marks, probably for a couple of years, about the amount of travel people can go on. I think it's, there are going to be question marks over the European Championships. I know, look, we're talking a couple of years' time for this. There is just too much, and they say they're going to generate more money, but who does that go to? That goes to the players, and that goes to the agents as well. And maybe some of it goes out to the Everglades or to Denver or wherever. I just think you're just ruining the European Cup. So, sometimes less is more. I just don't see the point of having, and then this idea of having these sort of so-called historical clubs can come in and nick teams' places. I mean, that really scrambles the competitive element of certain leagues, and particularly the Premier League. So it's a no from me.
Yeah, there's something magical, isn't there, about having a Leicester making the Champions League, and which they might do this season and stuff like that. That's what football's about, isn't it? I
think it's important also that the money gets spread around a bit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Leicester, my local club, if they get into the Champions League, that's probably 40, 50 million. Okay, so they'll probably sell Fofana to Arsenal in a couple of years. You know what they do. Leicester always sell one player a year, whether it's a Maguire, whether it's a Chilwell. They've got a very sensible business model. I don't know who, it might be Maddison this year and then Fofana the year after. But you know what, if they've got that Champions League money, that player might decide to stay. And they've got, and then there isn't that imperative to sell. So absolutely, let's share this money around a little bit more.
And talking about sort of the Premier League this season and stuff, it's obviously been highlighted, lack of pre-season, lots of games and all that kind of stuff. As someone who is actually getting to go and kind of see games live and report on them, are you noticing a lack of intensity, or is it a little bit? I mean, we've heard in recent weeks managers come out and saying, I think we're a bit tired. I think Thomas Tuchel did. Are you noticing that? What's kind of the standard like in your eyes?
I think it's always this stage of the season. Was it 2 and a bit months after Christmas and the hectic Christmas period and the European and the sort of the overlap of the cups? I think managers always say that. But I think there is an issue in terms of the of lack of pre-season. I think you are seeing it. I mean, but look, fair play to the players because they are doing it without an audience. They are absolutely giving everything. I think it's in some cases, I think it helps a manager like a Tuchel, who doesn't actually have much time, hasn't had much time to work with his players, so he can actually do it on match days. You hear his voice, because obviously no fans in there, so his voice can carry. So he can be screaming at Reece James or Callum Hudson-Odoi and getting his views over to them. Mikel Arteta as well. I mean, he seems to speak so many languages, and you can hear him sort of instructing as well. What I've also noticed is how certain substitutes are sent out, and they're giving sort of advice because they can. I mean, that's no secret. I mean, Fernandinho, when he is warming up, whether it's instruction or whether it's just him, he will be going down there and he'll be encouraging Foden. And of course, because there are no fans, there's no noise, his voice can carry. So, yeah, but
just on that, on talking and stuff, I'm going to jump around the agenda a bit, but just because you kind of mentioned it, and it's something we spoke to Lee Dixon about kind of, you know, the fact that you can hear players. Is there anyone, I'm talking Arsenal here, has there been anyone that has surprised you who's more vocal than you thought they were, or isn't as vocal as you thought? Do Arsenal lack leaders because you don't hear them? Are they quiet? What's...
I think Arsenal are one of the quieter teams. I mean, I went to see Jordan Henderson before Christmas, and I went in, got tested, went into the Liverpool training ground, and I said to him, I said, by the way, you're not number one in noises. I think Conor Cody and Kasper Schmeichel are definitely in there. I'll tell you one thing I did notice, and I think people have said this. I saw Matteo Guendouzi. I'm pretty sure. Did you play Man City early in the season? Away,
because when Guendouzi played,
he came.
It would have been last season, first game back after lockdown.
Right, interesting, because he was sitting about 5-6 rows in front of where sort of the press was scattered around, and I just looked at them, and I just when you're so close and you can see them, and I thought, this guy's attitude,
really,
his attitude. And you know what, you don't want to pick on young players, but you just, and then everything that, obviously Arteta's moved him on or sent him out on loan. I thought, yeah, you are getting to see a different side of players. I think you can see the stronger individuals. Like I watched Bukayo Saka play, and Southgate's talked about this. He said, what a conscientious individual he is, what a strong character he is as well. Emil Smith-Rowe, I've been so impressed with him. I mean, not just simply his touch, which we've seen, but with his attitude. I mean, he's got a fantastic attitude. All the attitude that Guendouzi, to me, didn't seem to have. And you love to see that, and you can focus on them a little bit more. You can hear them a bit more. I mean, if you're talking generally about Arsenal, you've got some fantastic young players. I mean, I would like to see Martinelli used a bit more. I don't know whether that's a deliberate thing with Arteta, who's sort of introducing him back in after slight sort of stop-start with injuries. But wow, you've got some of the best young kids around. And Smith-Rowe, I mean, he's a number 10 for me, but he's doing absolutely fantastically out wide, and he can drift in. And Tierney, who is, for me, as an outsider looking in, is just like, to use Troy Deeney's word, cojones. Tierney completely sums that up, and you want a team of 11 Tierneys in terms of that attitude. Again, coming a contrast to Guendouzi, but then you just look at Odegaard, and if there's, I want him to stay in English football because I love watching him. And everyone. I've been reading the narrative about Martin Odegaard in the last sort of couple of weeks, and since he's been playing so well, getting better game by game, really imposing his talent. And everyone's almost writing the whole thing up like he will be doing Arsenal a favour if he stays on. But actually, Arsenal are doing a really important job for him in terms of giving him that platform to express himself, to play with those sort of players, to play in the most competitive league in the world, to show his ability. And I did a piece with Steve Morrow a couple of months ago, and he was talking about how Arsenal tried to sign him when he was at 16 before he went to Real, and he went out for dinner with Arsene, and they just did all the work on him. And they just said, this is such a good talent. And I hope Odegaard stays for Arsenal's sake, so you supporters can go and sort of cheer him. But also I think for his sake, because Real Madrid is a basket case of a club. I know they've got Champions League football, but they might not win. Well, they're 6 points off Atletico in the race for La Liga. I just think that Odegaard can become a real legend. Not a legend, it's too early to say that, but he can become a real force in the years to come. Was he 22? If he stays with Arsenal and he develops, because you can see what Arteta's doing. I know there are a lot of Arteta in, Arteta out, but there is a direction of travel that you can see that Arteta is bringing in, and Odegaard would accelerate that.
We'll definitely talk about Arteta soon. Just a warning to Nigel, I'm going to bring you in if there is questions in a few minutes. Neil, you've got your hand up. If you have a question, I'll come to you in about a minute. What we normally find is sometimes people press it by mistake. But on Guendouzi, it's interesting because 3 days later, 4 days, we went to Brighton away, and that was when it all blew up for him, when we lost. And then he hasn't played in an Arsenal shirt since, and it seems like he's having issues on loan as well. So it's not looking great for him.
Well, I remember at the time people saying, well, maybe Arteta could handle him better. But having actually seen his behaviour sitting in the stands there, I went, no, it's him, not you, Mikel. It's the problems with the player. You know, there's a talent there. I can understand why many fans like him because he runs around and, you know, shouts and shakes his fists. But that's not necessarily what you want. So I think Arteta's got a pretty good judgment. I mean, just on Arteta. I mean, talking to the Manchester City players like Raheem Sterling, who I know a bit, just talking about Arteta's abilities, not simply as a coach, but his abilities as his man management. And I don't know if you've met him, but I would not like to cross him.
Met him as a player, so it's very different.
Great fantastic as a player. I mean, you know, obviously Arsenal had him at the tail end of his career, but honestly, hard as nails.
And it shows. I mean, you know, Mesut Ozil's not at the club now. Shokran Mustafi, Guendouzi, he's moved on a lot of players, and he's ultimately won the battle with Mesut Ozil, which was a battle I think none of us thought would ever end. I thought we'd be talking about that for years, well, months to come. But
yeah, I mean, I felt people were sort of slightly patronising towards Arteta when I heard all it came from the club because they were concerned about this whole sort of Ozil's support for Uyghur Muslims. I have complete empathy with Ozil. I think it's good when players stand up for it. But also, I mean, if you talk to Arteta and you talk to people who know Arteta, that was a footballing decision. That wasn't a political decision to keep sort of certain people at the club happy. That was because he didn't track back. He didn't contribute. And you can't have, you can't have a team with 10 at one point.
Yeah. Right, let's get through a few questions. Neil, you've still got your hand up. So if you want to unmute yourself, ask a question.
Tekil, Henry, thank you. It's based on what you were saying earlier about the lack of fans being in the ground and hearing stuff on the pitch. Obviously, in the last couple of weeks, you've seen Lacazette get absolutely slaughtered on Match of the Day for crying out at tackle. And then you've got a certain England captain that gets dived around and seems to be protected by the media. Do you feel that there is some sort of unofficial agenda to protect the England captain at the result of, the impact being other players like Lacazette gets absolutely taken to pieces?
I mean, this is a regular issue with supporters over England player. The focus, do the media give England players a soft ride? I can absolutely assure you, David Beckham didn't get a soft ride. Wayne Rooney certainly didn't get a soft ride. If you look at the front end of the book, the back end of the book, the criticism that, I get on with Wayne, but I've absolutely slaughtered him on occasion. If you look at the treatment front end of newspapers, all over social media, all over the digital world that we're now in, of Mason Greenwood and Phil Foden, actually, there's almost more scrutiny on them. You look at Kyle Walker's lockdown breach, you look at Jack Grealish's lockdown breach, the scrutiny on them is absolutely huge, and rightly so. Harry Kane, I think he does take a tumble a bit, but I don't think he gets protected. I think that Lacazette thing, you've got three people in the Match of the Day studio who looked at it, and because you can hear, it is quite noticeable in certain games with more players than others. So yeah, I don't think it's about passport. I think it's just about individuals. But absolutely, look, there's enough scrutiny on Harry Kane, and if he gets put up as England captain tomorrow night before the game against San Marino. We've got a press conference with Southgate and a player, which if Kane's captain, then he may well come out and talk. Then it will be, I mean, the broadcasters will ask their questions to him. But I promise you, when the, how many of us, 15 of us, the sort of digital newspaper guys will go in, it's not a Vickers tea party. We'll absolutely go in there. I mean, I've had some tearing rows with England players down the years. So yeah, it's. I promise you. I mean, people say it's nationality. It's not.
Ian Wright did obviously, I think, come out and sort of apologise to Lacazette. I think he called him the next day as well. Eamon, you've got your hand up. If you want to unmute, quickly ask your question.
Yeah. Hi, Henry.
Hi, Eamon.
How you doing? I used to work with you in the Telegraph many, many years ago.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, how you doing?
Not so bad. What I was going to say is when we were working together, it was just the newspapers and broadcasters. Now there are a plethora of websites, and I mean, even I subscribe to some on an Arsenal Google search every day. My basic question is that diluting with so many people, so many different sources? Is that diluting the authenticity of football analysis?
No, I think it's absolutely adding to it. Eamon, I think it's, the more people, the better. I mean, citizen journalism. I mean, if we're talking about Arsenal, everyone sort of listening here will know more about Arsenal than I do, because it's your life. I mean, I'm, at the risk of sounding like sort of, Captain Von Trapp, I've got sort of, loads of others to sort of keep an eye on. No, I don't think that's an issue at all. One thing I will say is that if I look at the stories that are being broken on social media, it's from my paper, The Times, it might be a Paul Joyce in the Northwest on a Liverpool story, or Dom King, rival paper, the Daily Mail, or if it's a big Chelsea story, Lampard leaving, it will be Matt Law from the Telegraph. And then obviously everyone else sort of dives on the story, and it's a huge debate. But you mentioned the word source, but the source is from individual reporters with huge with followings, with contacts, with years of experience. So I actually think there's quite a good blend at the moment. So you've got the sort of familiar faces breaking a lot of the stories. Say Sam Wallace broke a brilliant story, which he got Football Writer of the Year for, on Operation Big Picture. Yeah. So when he unleashed that went on the Telegraph website. That obviously went in the Telegraph paper the next day, physical version, but it went all around the world and everyone leapt on it. So people say, oh, the sort of, mainstream media, we're dinosaurs or whatever. But actually the dinosaurs, look, we're digital journalists now. I don't consider myself a newspaper. I do podcasts, I'm writing a book, I'm writing sort of a script at the moment for a series. It's still basically telling the story. And the good people who tell the stories, like a Sam Wallace, like a Jason Birch, they will put stuff out on social media and then everyone responds to it. So that's not completely answer your question, but from our time at the Telegraph, there's still so many good journalists there who are the main source for all these big stories, which then everyone else, podcasts, whoever, dive in on.
Yeah, and just you mentioned Sam Wallace winning an award. Obviously, you've got to congratulate you, Henry, as well, for winning the FSA Writer of the Year as well. So obviously, congratulations for that. And I think that's a big award because it's from the fans. I think, I don't know if that felt a bit different to other awards you might have won, but
yeah, it did. No, I thought I was quite touched by that, actually, because you go on social media and I say some stupid things on social media and I quite rightly get a kicking, normally by my friends, let alone by other people. And I think it's good, and that's why I've really enjoyed social media, because look, I'm white, I'm male, so I'm not those touchstones of the abuse that black journalists, black players get, female reporters get, female players get, and it's absolutely sickening what they get. So I can go walk into social media, flick my phone on, not thinking who's going to abuse me. I get some abuse, but it's fine. So social media for me is absolutely brilliant, just because I follow you, Ackle. So and you give me potentially a free guide and a glimpse and a window on Arsenal Football Club. So I mean, like, I will say a game finishes, I'll have written 1,200 words. I've then got sort of 40 minutes to do a rewrite edition to get another piece out. I will immediately go on the Arsenal fans forums to see what fans are saying, to see what you're saying, Apple, to see what Tim's saying, you know, just to get a feel of it. So no, actually, I do think there's a certain sort of synergy between all forms at the moment. So I actually think football and the media is actually in a pretty good place, and I think the clubs who are just so want all the content for themselves, they've loosened up a bit, and I found it a lot during lockdown. And okay, I'm at the Times as a platform. It's not necessarily a sort of tabloid. They don't have to beware headlines, but the players have been absolutely brilliant. Players want to talk. You know, they'll give you your number. I mean, they'll you know, you'll Zoom. I mean, I Zoomed Carl Walker the other day, and he was, you know, the Zoom actually ran out, and he said, "Oh, can we do another 40 minutes because it gets me out of home school?" You know, and I think the players have been really good, and I actually think people talk about football journalism. I think it's in a very good place at the moment.
Get yourself a premium account, Henry. Trust me, it's brilliant. You can borrow ours if you want. If you've got an Arsenal interview coming up. I'm going to take one more question from Paul, and then I'm going to come to Nigel, and then I've got a few other points, and there are a few more hands up, which is great because we love a bit of interaction. So, Paul, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, guys.
Hi.
You mentioned Mikel Arteta a minute ago. Under Unai Emery, is 51 games in charge compared to Arteta's current 49. Emery had the slight better record. What do you make of that in general and Arteta this season?
I was really disappointed with Emery. I just thought that, you know, there's a good manager there, and I just thought that you could just see it fading away. You could just see the players losing faith in him. You could just see the fans beginning to turn. Arteta's a different character. Maybe in a way you needed to be the manager after the manager who followed Arsene Wenger, because Wenger, you know, he's a legend at the club. I mean, you know, we fell out. I felt he should have gone 4 or 5 years before. We've subsequently had a slight rapprochement. I shook hands. I said, listen, you know, sorry, I was critical of you, but, you know, I just felt that, you know, your time was up, basically. And he's such a sort of dignified person, but such a huge figure. I don't need to tell you that. I mean, he was such a huge figure.
You shared a panel with him at the Grenfell Tower event, didn't you, for the writers?
And you know what, I'll tell you something about that. You know, I've been very critical of Wenger for a long time. And he turned up at that panel. And I think it was on a Friday, the day before the opening day of the season. And he wanted to be there because Community and Arsenal have probably got, you know, along with Everton, probably the best community project with Alan Sefton in the country. And Wenger wanted to be there. And it was very interesting, the whole sort of, you know, the last sort of few years of Wenger, because I remember one of my son's friends said to me, he was like 21, 22, he was a huge Arsenal fan. He said to me, you don't understand. My father left our family when I was 3 or 4. The only strong male presence I've had in my life has been Arsene Wenger. And that is why I will always stand up and support him. And you're wrong. And I said, oh, yeah, you know, come over to my house. He was a friend of my son's. And, you know, Wenger was absolutely huge. So that legacy, shadow, you can call it, it's very difficult for the next manager to take. So maybe Arteta has timed it well, that Emery has just dealt with. And you could see in the Emery era everything that needed to be done at Arsenal in terms of you needed a strong leader in there, because you haven't really had strong leaders. I mean, Per Mertesacker is a very impressive individual, but you really need to go back, arguably, to Vieira in terms of sort of strong captains and leaders within the place. So, but Arteta, I mean, we always have this thing with the sort of the people in the press box before the start of the season, and we always say, right, we have a sort of list of managers that you would most like to go for a drink with, and also that you would most want alongside you in a fight. Now, if there was a fight, I would be halfway towards Highgate Village and diving into the nearest wine bar to stay out of trouble. But I mean, Sean Dyche tends to sort of win it. Jurgen Klopp's up there. But I think Mikel Arteta, don't underestimate how hard and tough he is. This is a really strong individual who absolutely knows what he wants. So coming back to your point, I just think that I know there are a lot of people who are not a fan of his, but I've been a fan of his from the word go. And I just think he's, you look at the players he's shifted out, he'll shift out more. And what's he going to be like with a proper pre-season to work with these players as well?
Absolutely. And of course, you were there the night Unai Emery got announced. You and the Romford Pele, Ray Parlour. It was, it was all happening that night because we obviously thought Mikel was going to be announced then, but he wasn't. It was obviously Unai Emery. So, Nigel, any questions from the floor? I was also going to say, Henry, it's pointless looking at my social media 40 minutes after a game because I won't be talking much sense. You know where I'll be. Nigel, any questions from the floor?
Yeah, a couple of quick ones, Henry. From Jane Jones, you mentioned at the beginning the soulless atmosphere and the not depressing, but the difficult environment the game is. Do you think what we've got is better than nothing? For whatever reason, that's the first one. Second one, to follow on from Wenger there. This is from Chris Hudson. What do you reckon of the FIFA Wenger plan for summer football in a calendar year rather than over a year?
Well, starting with Chris's point first, I just think it's ridiculous. I just think we're going to the well too often. The World Cup, the European Championships, every 4 years for each tournament. That's what makes them special. You don't want every summer to have it. And we're going to kill these players. I mean, Michael Owen, from the age of 16, was every summer was going to tournament after tournament, absolutely knackering himself. And then towards mid-20s, late 20s, he was just exhausted. And his body, sadly, began to fall apart. So no, look, I'm a huge fan of Wenger. I think he's going to make some useful comments on observations on VAR. But the fact that he's working with FIFA, and FIFA are about money, and FIFA want these tournaments, and obviously UEFA may well want another tournament thrown in there. But I think we're coming off the back of a year where everyone's questioned travel, everyone's questioned gathering in numbers. And I think we've got to be fairly cautious when we just think, well, let's all travel around the world again. I mean, it's ridiculous that we got this European Championship, which is scattered in 10 countries. So let's have a little bit more, just, you've got to have a bit of breathing time. Also, if there was football every day of the year, I would be absolutely delighted. But football needs a break. Also, we've got to respect other sports as well. Let cricket breathe, let athletics breathe. They've got to throw Olympics in there as well. Coming back to, sorry, what was Jane's question again?
Is the football we're seeing at the moment, no fans, etc., better than nothing at all, better than the lockdown?
Yeah. I think, what's 130,000 people have died. We're all in the debt of the NHS, the key workers, the doctors, the scientists who've come up with the vaccine, but life has to go on. You can't bow to this virus. I think it was so important that the Project Restart happened, that the football happened. I know it was for financial reasons, but I also think for the mental health of the country. The government's not stupid. I mean, they can be at times, but on this, they were very sensible. They said, right, we want games all across the week so that all the football fans out there are at home, can watch it. Okay, many can't afford Sky, BT, and that is a huge issue. But absolutely, I think it was right that they carried on playing, but totally with the caveat that we all knew how grim it was going to be without supporters. But the show, brutal as it sounds, had to go on, but with that respectful nod to all the sacrifices that have been made. The one thing I'll add on that is going to games initially, particularly after when Project Restart was, and there was that huge question is the NHS going to be overwhelmed? I had a huge issue walking out of stadiums and seeing 2 ambulances waiting there just in case a player got injured. That was the one time I thought, oh, those ambulances were really needed elsewhere, particularly in London and Manchester, I think Liverpool and some of the big conurbations, when you just saw ambulances queuing up outside Barts or certain hospitals and you thought, should football really be going ahead when all those ambulances are needed elsewhere? And we talked to the Premier League about it. We talked to the clubs about it. We said, is this right? And they said, well, actually, they've got, I don't know how they manage it, but they weren't being taken away from the emergency services. But Jane, I mean, it's a very good question. But I think football had to continue.
By having 2 ambulances there, you could be saving 7 others who are going to people who are struggling with mental health potentially. So it's so hard, isn't it? Thanks, Nigel. We'll see if we'll bring you back in 10, 15 if there is any more. Hillary's got her hand up. I'm going to bring you in. Hillary, do you want to unmute? Ask your question. Welcome.
I pressed it by mistake. Sorry.
Do you want to ask a question anyway? Because you're on.
No, I've been busy listening to all the questions. I think they've answered. Everybody's asked, or Henry's already talked about it. Thank you very much.
No worries. Paul, I think you've got a hand up. Would you like to come in? Unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear? Yes, thank you very much.
Crack on.
Hi, Paul.
Thank you very much again, Henry. Always a pleasure to listen to you, especially when you're at the Premier Club Supporters Trust. I couldn't agree more with your comment about Arteta's toughness. What I've always made me laugh up on the North Bank when he eventually came to us, and I would agree with you also that sadly I think we should have bought him a few seasons before we did, given our need for a centre-half yet again at that time in particular. I would have gone in and tried to get Jagielka and Arteta for a cut-down price when Everton were not as well off as they are now, but that's history. But what I loved was his gentle fouls, tactical fouls, and I could watch him. He always made sure that, okay, I'm going to get blown up. I might get away with it without getting booked as well. It was that clever. It was like a proper challenge, but there was no way the opposition was going to go away with the ball. And it was just a joy. It always sort of happened just over the halfway line. I thought there's no real danger here, surely. But what that leads me to say is, do you think that we have in Arteta, and I am a big fan of him, as you probably would gather, one of the most football-wise and in other respects intelligent manager, and by gosh, I personally feel we are so lucky to have him. And I think a lot of the hiccups that we've seen with the players, it is with the players. Being brutally honest, we have a very, very mixed squad. There are, in my humble view, and I'm not going to name players, I think it's invidious.
Let's get Henry's view on that, Paul.
I just want to say, if you really think we have a little gem here in Arteta in his overall intelligence of, another Iniesta, Xavi type football brain.
Do you have a gem, Henry?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. I mean, I still think there's a lot of work to be done on the squad. I still want to see players like Bellerin raise their game more consistently. I know there's more sort of pressure on him in terms of competition, and it was good to see Callum Chambers performing like that. I still think there is investment needed, particularly I still think at centre half. Odegaard, if he stays, I think you've got 2 fantastic number 10s there with him and Emile Smith-Rowe. But I think if you look at the players, I know he's not solely responsible for recruitment because of his relationship with Edu, and they do there seems to be more sort of synergy and logic in terms of the players that they're bringing in. I mean, if you look at some of the players, Gabriel, and if you look at Thomas Partey, who I still look at him, I think I'm a huge fan of his. But I'm thinking, you are still at 7.5 out of 10 at the moment. I can still see you moving.
Doesn't look fit yet, does he?
Yeah, maybe that's it. And obviously with a pre-season, that will help. I mean, some of these players are running on fumes at the moment because it has been pretty intense. So yeah, look, I think he's a very, very, very impressive individual. I still think he needs, another transfer window out and in. Still think he needs a pre-season to work. But I remember when he left Arsenal, and I think did he come on and he scored a goal, or he forced a goal or whatever, and he spoke afterwards to Arsenal TV, and it was such a genuinely emotional, heartfelt farewell to the club. You just thought, that's not just simply an employee. That's someone who was emotionally engaged with his surroundings, with the staff. And I know Arsenal have become a little bit more corporate, and I don't like the way some of the staff within the building are being treated. But actually, when you go to Arsenal, there's still a little bit of the marble halls there. I'm not a Kroenke fan, but I just think the heart and soul of Arsenal is still there. And I think he gets that and he respects that. And that's one of the reasons why he did come back, because Arsenal's a very special club. In terms of bricks and mortar changes, but the people who are there, you see them there, and they're Arsenal Blazers, and you talk to the stewards who've been there a long time, and the stewards and the staff around the sort of the press area. They are genuine people who I can't imagine they get paid that much, but they get paid in love because they love the club. So there is something very special about the club. And I think Arteta gets that. He gets the community side. He gets the amazing work that Alan Sefton and the amazing people you've got working on that side. And I just think he can just see that there is something ready to take off here. But he's just got to get rid of some people. He's got to reinstill the hunger, needs more consistency. I mean, I was at the Olympiacos game the other night and I was thinking, what is going on here? Because it's a fairly average Greek side. I know you've had trouble with them in recent years, but you need that consistency. And people look at it, what are you, 9th in the table at the moment?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's not good enough for Arsenal Football Club.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I know we used to mock Wenger for saying, the Champions League finishing 4th is a trophy, but really Arsenal should be in that top 4. I know it's far more competitive now. You've got Leicester, you've got Chelsea reviving, Liverpool, Manchester City, Manchester United obviously having come back, Spurs as well with their new stadium, and some of the players they've got.
West Ham.
I mean, look at West Ham. Look how well they've done. So absolutely. So look, he is in a real fight. But he's got a fighting soul, that man.
But I want to ask you about the English Arsenal players, but there are a few hands up, and to be honest, Henry, we don't often get lots of hands up, so it shows that people are keen to ask you questions. Which is
I thought it was just
great.
the old trap.
Yeah, maybe they are. Maybe they're trying to be the old back four. I'm going to bring in Tony, Clock and Tone. If you unmute yourself, Tone, you can ask your question.
Thank you, Akil. Thank you, Henry, for being with us tonight.
My pleasure, Tony.
Real pleasure listening to you. And I can tell you're a journalist who's on the fan side, and I thank you for that. My question would be, would you please do an article on how clubs treat the elderly fans? I'm now 71 years old, and I'm paying a full season ticket when I could have gone into the old age pensioners bit at 65. Please, you cannot put me in with children and parents when I'm getting behind my team, because I'm loud. I'm very, very loud. As the saying goes, Clock and Tone don't need a microphone. And it's true. People around me in Block 4 quite often know they've got to put their fingers to their ears because I'm that loud, always getting behind the team. I shouldn't have to go into a family enclosure to support my team and annoy the mums and dads and the children with the volume that I use. And so, would you please research how many clubs look after elderly fans? Because I really need to sit where I am now. And because of health issues, it would cost me a lot of money to miss games because I'm out to go into hospital at very short notice. I will still shout as loud as I shout to the day I die, and hopefully, well, not hopefully, I probably will collapse at some stage at getting behind the team. Chelsea, a good friend of mine, at 65, he sat in the same seat around the friends, with the friends that he'd been with for ages. He could reduce the price of his season ticket and stand in the same seat. Can other clubs please do this?
Yeah, so sorry, Tony, your issue is where you sit or the price of your seat?
If I go for a reduced price ticket, Henry, I would have to move to the family enclosure with children. And I'm sorry, sometimes I get carried away with the passion. When a referee makes a bad decision, I let that referee know. And I apologise for the language I use, but that's the way I am. I shouldn't have to move and lose and sit with those. I should be allowed to sit in the same seat at a reduced price.
Well, Tony, first and foremost, I wish you incredibly good and long health, because it sounds like Arsenal absolutely need your support. The noise that you make obviously generates others. The players appreciate that. The away fans will then respond to that. So it's absolutely vital, Tony, that you are there making as much noise as you can. One issue that I do have with Arsenal, coming on to your concern about where you sit and the costs of not wanting to be near the families. You see, Arsenal used to be very good at accommodating individual fans' requests, and I can show you the emails that I get from members of the is it the Platinum Club or the Diamond Club that you've got there, and these are people who are paying a hell of a lot of money, as Tony, as I'm sure you are, and they actually want a bit more respect and a bit more understanding of where they go. But I think you've lost one or two good people who would look after the fans and would absolutely understand a situation like yours and accommodate you, because they would look at you, Tony, and listen to you by the sound of it, and realize you're exactly the type of person this club needs, and you actually, you should be staying where you are. So that doesn't help in any way, apart from the fact that your sentiments are shared by others who are having issues with the club in terms of how they're treated on tickets.
I've jotted that down, and it's something we can, of course, raise with Arsenal, which we absolutely will in our next meeting with them. There's a few more hands. I'm going to do one more hand and ask you about a few of the England players, and if we've got time, we'll come in. So I think it was Amanda had her hand up longest. Amanda, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Hi, Henry.
Hi, Amanda. How are you?
Really enjoy your tweets on Twitter. Follow you from my Twitter account. But I would just like to say something about what Clockend Tone said, Henry. What his point is that my dad's been going to the Arsenal for about 60 years. He's 75 now. We all sit in the East Stand Upper. He'd have to go in the family enclosure without me. Right. How is that fair? So, Akil, I'd really appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah. He stopped going the last couple of seasons because he can't afford it. I'm so on this with Clockend Tone. I remember having a word with Gazidis about this and he wasn't interested. Someone who supported the club since he must be 1955, can't sit with his daughter, who I've been going over 40 years now. So that's one thing, Henry, if you ever get a chance to write about. Most other clubs don't do that. I know for a fact Liverpool don't do that. They can sit with their family at a reduced rate. That's what he's trying to get at. Pay an OAP rate and sit with his family. So I'm totally with that. That wasn't my point. My other point was Arteta. I am a massive fan of him. I talk about it on the podcast that I do. I'm constantly defending him. He needs a pre-season. He needs a full season. He needs to come out of COVID, the pandemic. He came in and he's been thrown into the world that we've all lived in, which has not been great. Can I ask, do you know what the players think of him?
Players really like him. Really good question, Amanda. So just first, before I forget, I'll email Vinay about that situation because I think it's, your dad and Tony and yourself are, you're vital. You are the lifeblood of the club. The fact that you've been, your dad's been going there 60 odd years, did you say, since he was 15? I mean, he was just, you're absolutely the lifeblood of the club. What was the last?
Arteta.
Oh yeah, Arteta.
What do the players think of Arteta?
Oh, so the players really like him. Oh, absolutely. You can tell that. I mean, partly because the more time a manager's there and he shifts those out that he doesn't like, then obviously he's got more of his people there. He's got more of his recruitment. He's got his style of players. I find there's a certain inconsistency in his rotation, and I would love to know if he thinks if he genuinely knows what his best starting 11 is in his biggest game. Got a problem with Aubameyang, because Aubameyang, since he got the contract and maybe even a bit before, I don't think he's delivered. I don't think he's look. You haven't got many captain types. When Aubameyang's on his game, I think he's absolutely fabulous. But if you told me that your front four would be Emile Smith-Rowe on the left, Odegaard as a 10, Saka on the right, and Martinelli. I know there's a debate about whether he's a centre forward or not, but that's not a bad front four going forward. Well, they're all aged 19 to 22, 23. That's kind of the future for Arsenal. I think Lacazette, when he's come in, he works hard. good player. But Aubameyang, I think Aubameyang's got to be Arteta's next work in terms of getting him more consistent, getting him finishing those chances, more focus, and getting him turning up at games on time.
Yeah, that helps, doesn't it? You mentioned him there, the boy, the man that plays on that right-hand side, Bukayo Saka. I mean, you know, as an Arsenal fan, as an England fan, I'm just very excited about Bukayo Saka. And I remember when he just came into the team and I met him and he just looked lost. It was at Arsenal. He just looked lost because he was just, I think he just didn't know how to act because he had played a couple of Europa League games. But if you look at him now, not only off the field is he now more confident, but on the field, I mean, there was a moment when, you know, against West Ham when he was holding the ball up and their midfielder, Souček, was literally couldn't get the ball off him because he was holding it up. So he is just an amazing talent. And I know you, Henry, following England as much as you follow sort of Premier League clubs, you know, how good is Bukayo Saka? And have you kind of got to know him a little bit as well from a sort of, you know, have you written about him? Have you interviewed him? What's he like?
I've written a lot about him, obviously with England and with Arsenal as well, but also we had a sort of collective Zoom where 6 or 7 of us talked to him. And as Southgate had told us, I mean, Southgate's got this, the New Zealand principle of, if I can say it, that no dickhead policy, which is you've got to have good characters. And a lot of managers say this, you know, it's the all black things. You've got to sweep the sheds. You've got to have this, the team-minded humility about players. And for Southgate, and he said this openly to us, Bukayo Saka embodies that. He said he listens, he learns quickly. He's so intelligent, you know, eager to learn, humble. So I think you've got an absolute gem there. I mean, I thought it was very interesting when Arteta was trying to get that sort of balance. I mean, Tierney was storming down the left, and I think he moved Bukayo Saka over to the right. So you actually had, you know, the opposing teams being stretched, one by a fullback, one by a sort of more attacking midfielder winger. But I think if you look at Bukayo Saka will go to the European Championships. He'll be one of the 23 because he can play left wing back, he can play right wing back, he can play as one. You know, if Southgate's going to play 3-4-3. He can play arguably 4 of those positions. So I think you've got an absolute gem there, and so do England. And
do you think he'll play much for England? Sorry on that, because he has played on the left of, you know, as in the 4 or 5, or, you know, but he's played there, and ironically it's been Ainsley Maitland-Niles who had played there when he's not playing there. They'd rotated, but do you think he'll get many minutes for England in the Euros?
Yeah, I think he'll get many minutes in the next 3 games. I mean, if you know, can you imagine if you San Marino's left back at the moment and you thought you got Bukayo Saka coming at you? I mean, with that pace and that persistence, I think he's a fantastic player. But just coming back to this character, you know, players develop at different speeds, but attitude is so important. And I talked to Mertesacker about him, and he just said he's just a really good, strong character. And I think he carries himself well. He embodies what I would consider, or long associated as the principles of Arsenal Football Club. Just respect to staff, polite, and just a huge hunger to win. I mean, just because he smiles doesn't mean that he's, you know, he'll shirk in a tackle or he won't go all the way just to make sure he gets victory. So I think he's an important player for England as well as Arsenal.
There's a question on Martinelli. Toby, would you like to come in? Unmute yourself. We haven't got long, so I'm going to try and rattle through them. So feel free to ask your question.
Hi, lads. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for this. Very interesting.
Hi, Toby.
Ever. Just had a quick question, kind of on the theme of Martinelli. Should we be concerned by the emerging trend of certain young players being sort of cut adrift as a result of apparently testing relationships with Arteta? If you think your Salibas, Guendouzi, and maybe it doesn't seem that Arteta particularly fancies Martinelli?
He always talks quite highly of him, and I think anyone who's actually watched Martinelli, look at the the impact that he can have. I think he's a fabulous talent. I just think he's got, was he 19? He's had 1 or 2 sort of injuries. I think he just needs to be blended in. But Arteta's not stupid. He can just see him. talking to Steve Morrow, who spent a bit of time with Martinelli, says really good kid, very professional, good family, focused. So I don't think there's an issue there. I mean, remember, we do live in an age where, you know, if you lose a corner, it's a crisis. Social media all over everything. I don't know about Arteta's relationship with Saliba. Does anyone really know what's sort of happening there? I think you've got to give him a little bit more credit that this is a very intelligent, with Arteta, he's a very intelligent football man who wants the best for Arsenal, who wants to build a team because it's his reputation as well as Arsenal. So I don't think he's going to deliberately cold shoulder a player who he feels. Obviously, Guendouzi's out because his attitude is wrong. Maitland-Niles, I mean, I was there pitch side, I think it was at Fratton Park when Maitland-Niles was on the bench and there was issue. Arteta came out and very openly said, yeah, he's got to try harder in training. You want that. You know, for those kids, it's like, you know, we've all got bosses who put heat on us. And if that helps us develop, that's absolutely brilliant. I think praise softens young players. I think that a little bit of constructive criticism, guiding them, getting them to develop, keeping them hungry. I'm not saying this about the young Arsenal players, but we do know a lot of players in this country. They have social media teams, they have entourages, they have families who are relying on them, and they're just sort of saying, you're wonderful, you're wonderful, you're wonderful. For some young kids, it can be difficult to keep a balanced head and, you know, when a little bit of praise. And then they have this sort of strange world that they live in, is that they can turn on Instagram and everyone's saying you're the best thing in the world. And then they can turn on Instagram and just have a torrent of abuse. And it sort of slightly scrambles them. They don't know where. Whereas I think they can look to Arteta and find someone who will criticise them privately when the time's right. I'm not a fan of the Mourinho style of throwing players on the bus. I just simply, you know, it doesn't help. Luke Shaw will probably have fantastic games over the next three games with England. Everyone say, well, that's fantastic. And I'm sure Luke Shaw will admit that Mourinho's style of management, the lack of people skills at Manchester United, inhibited him. Because I think Arteta's got the right balance. He pushes them, he's tough, but he's also quite emotionally engaged. He's got those sort of people skills that a Brendan Rodgers, a Jurgen Klopp, the Pep Guardiola have got.
It's interesting that Guendouzi and Saliba both were signed before Mikel or Edu were here, whereas Martinelli, I think Edu was involved. I think, you know, there's a bit of difference there. Nicholas, and then I'll come to Sonny, the final two questions from the floor. So Nicholas, would you like to unmute yourself?
Hi there.
Hello, Nicholas.
Thank you very much for today's show. And we always appreciate your comments. Follow you plenty. Just real quick question about the summer. I keep reading how big a summer is going to be for Arsenal Football Club in terms of our squad. What surgery, if that's the right word to say, do you think our squad currently needs in terms of which players you feel should leave and which players need to be replaced, and who do you think, and in what positions should we be replacing these players?
I think right back's an issue. I think if you look at Bellerin, there is a very good player in there, but whether anything is relating back to the injury, I just don't think he's trained on as much. I find him a very admirable, impressive individual in terms of the amazing work he's been doing in the community, which people know about, and a lot of work that he does sort of privately as well. But ultimately, the most important thing is that he delivers for the team. So I do think right back is still an area of concern.
I was just going to say, we had James Ollie was our guest for our last virtual event for ESPN, obviously formerly of The Standard, who's wrote quite a few strong stories about Bellerin probably being off this summer. It might have it would have happened last summer, but I think it was a kind of stay here one more year as we get through the pandemic. So I think there are strong rumours that could be moving on. So
I had this view earlier in the season where a professional footballer, who I imagine has played a substantial amount, couldn't get a throw in right. I just think that shows either poor concentration. But you know what? There's a good player in there. I mean, there was at the game the other day when he was playing, and he was all over the place in the first half, and then he went on a really good run. So look, there is a good player in there. I just hope I'm sure he's focused enough to realise that he needs to raise his game. And why leave Arsenal? I mean, where is he going to go? Is he going to go to a top Champions League team? If he can see the direction of travel under Arteta, stay, knuckle down and work, nail down that number one right back position, be there for another 3-4 years, deliver on the pitch, be part of something special under Arteta. So, I mean, in terms of your general point, you need a centre half. I mean, David Luiz can be fantastic, but he could, you know, he can occasionally make mistakes. Pablo Mari, I think, is an interesting player. And he's had 1 or 2 good games, but I still, you know, I mean, I growing up as a journalist, just seeing the centre halves that you've had down the years. You know, you've had some of the best world centre halves. Go back to the 70s and McClintock, if you want, probably go back to the 30s and the great teams there. You know, you've always had those reliable defenders. I do think you need more of them. I still have an issue with Granit Xhaka, not because of the bookings, but I'm just not quite sure that you've got Partey in midfield. Dennis Sparse, I quite like, but I don't think he's necessarily the next level up. I would say the most important thing is sorting Aubameyang out, sorting his radar out, sorting his focus out, and just doing everything you can. And this is Kroenke's biggest issue in the summer, is getting Martin Odegaard to stay.
Absolutely. Sonny, final sort of question from the floor. If you want to unmute yourself, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Akil. Hi, Henry. I was a Telegraph journalist in the 90s as well, Henry, but on the business desk. So you're meeting us all this evening. So
reunion.
Anyway, slightly off topic because it's not directly Arsenal related, but maybe Saka's the connection. The Euros, there's a lot of talk on where it will be held, when it will be held. Any inkling, any insight on your grapevine? You know, will it be held in the 10 countries or will be switched to the UK? And if so, do you think fans will be allowed into the games in June?
Well, I think they will. I think certainly at Wembley, I think for the Scotland game, you'll have 20-odd thousand in there. So I think Wembley should be all right. I think we miss out maybe the Croatia, the first game. In terms of
Czech Republic's then after it's when you potentially could have a full house in theory.
Yeah, which would be great. But, you know, we've had this conversation. I mean, I can remember when Michel Platini suddenly announced it on the hoof that it was going to go all around. And I mean, it was a press conference. And I said to him, I said, well, I mean, you've got fans will be travelling all over for the European Championships and, you know, all over Europe. And what I love about European Championships, and I know we've had sort of Portugal and, you know, sorry, not Portugal, but, you know, we've often had shared ones. You know. But I love the fact that it's a celebration of one country. You can focus on that country. But, you know, you talk to UEFA and what they want to do is they want to spread the money around from the European Championships. Politically, that is good for them. It keeps the sort of, the status quo. It's a very political thing. I think a lot of it will eventually end up at Wembley. I know England have got probably possibly five of their games there. And I just think they'll realise the error of their ways. I mean, look at the state that Europe's in at the moment. I mean, Italy, you know, are posting really very scary mortality rates. Germany, who we thought were in control of the virus, you know, they've got issues there as well. France, I mean, my daughter's at college in Paris. She's in lockdown there. There's a sort of curfew in the evening. So I think there's, you know, they've got huge issues. I think it's pointing increasingly to England could host it. You know, we are, for all our faults as a country, we host events absolutely brilliantly, whether it's musical events, whether it's sporting events, and the Premier League clubs could easily, their grounds, they could easily host the Euros at short notice and host it here. But I don't understand why we don't have vaccine passports. I just thought that, you know, on your phone, and that's, I mean, I went off to Reykjavik to cover England against Iceland when we were allowed to travel. I had to do 5 days quarantine in a Reykjavik hotel, and they track and traced me everywhere. And I've still got them. They're a bit confused probably now. I keep on heading into Aldi and Peterborough, but they did it brilliantly. It was all done on your phone. And I don't see why we can't do that with, you know, you've got the vaccine.
That's what, Henry,
why not?
Henry, that's what they're going to test at the FA Cup final.
Yeah, good.
So it will be vaccine passport, or if you haven't been vaccinated yet, you'll have the chance to take a test so that there isn't that unfairness. And I think UEFA have set early April when they've asked all the cities to tell them what they're capable of doing. Cover your ears, UEFA. I think they'll then pick the cities that say they can have the most fans in, because UEFA like the ticketing revenue.
Yeah.
Wembley delivers good ticketing revenue, and with our vaccination rate, I think we'll offer the best crowds. So I would agree with you that we'll see quite a lot of games played at Wembley.
Yeah.
And by the end of the tournament, assuming everything's going well with COVID in society, I think we'll see some quite big crowds, maybe more than half full by the semi-final and final stage.
Well, I think there'll be mainly home fans, because I can't see there being huge amounts of travelling fans in this current climate.
And that allows me to come in on a question Pierre asked, which is actually about overseas fans attending the Premier League games and how Arsenal will treat them. I think Arsenal will treat you as a season ticket holder like anybody else, but you will have to comply with the UK's laws on travelling into the country. And so if the UK says you can't travel in or you have to quarantine, then that's what you will have to do before using your ticket. Similarly, someone asked me about the chances of going to Gdansk should Arsenal make the Europa League final. Well, if they keep it in that stadium, I'd say it looks very, very unlikely given current requirements on travelling. So English ticket holders in Wembley for the Euros would be my expectation.
I mean, it's great for Gareth Southgate. I mean, if you've almost got a Euro, I mean, unless we have a wobble on penalties, if you've almost got a Euro 96 atmosphere, and it is mainly England fans in there, I think that's great. I don't think the FA will be complaining.
And watch out for that website on the day they release the tickets, because they'll have to start again, and that'll be a scramble.
And the atmosphere in the country will be positive anyway, because we've all been in lockdown for the best part of a year. So we're going to have a natural sort of excitement.
And
for
we'll
life.
We'll be allowed in pubs by then to watch the game if we can't go to Wembley.
Yeah, cool. And I know Pierre quite well as well. He's a chap who lives in Sweden who comes over for most home games. So this does impact, fans from all over. England on the Euros, sort of England's chances. I mean, we've obviously talked about Saka, and we hope that he'll get a chance. I think someone said, John Burke said, we hope he doesn't play all 3 games coming up because he looks quite knackered. But generally, what are your thoughts on England's chances? I mean, they've got some talent there, haven't they? I mean, we don't know our best team maybe because we've got so much to choose from.
I'm not a fan of 3-4-3. I just think that a lot of them play with the back 4. I think that one of the reasons why he's gone 3-4-3, 3 centre halves, is that he was a little bit nervous about the quality of his centre backs. I think it's a time to be bold. I think you play Stones and Maguire in there. He'll always have Maguire in there because he's a leader. He's very important for the team.
Mm-hmm.
And then that allows you to get, I'm a huge Phil Foden fan, that allows you to get a Foden in there. So, look, I think England have got the players. I just hope that Southgate is bold, adventurous. I do think the way that it's panning out next year in terms of Qatar, I think you'll have had the England players won't be knackered. We know they're going to be knackered this summer because they've run themselves into the ground. And I know a lot of foreign players who are over here have done the same. But if you talk privately to some of these players, they also have a sort of separate fitness that's running alongside their short-term fitness, which is preparing them for the summer as well. And you might see them missing 1 or 2 games here and there. Just coming back to the next 3 games, I think it'd be an outrage if any player plays all 3 games. I think that's disrespectful to the clubs. Also, it's very like, look, Marcus Rashford he's got the ankle injury, he's carrying a shoulder injury, which may well need an operation after the Euros. He shouldn't be anywhere near the England squad. They should have just left him home and just said, listen, have 10 days at home, relaxing, recuperating, just sort of, just yourself ready for the summer. It's more respectful to Manchester United. And if we're going into games against particularly Albania and San Marino, thinking that we need a half-fit Marcus Rashford, then I think we don't.
Yeah. Who starts in goal for you?
Well, he'll start Pickford obviously Pickford's out of the injury. But he'll start Pickford because he's never let him down, and Southgate's big on that because he has if you're picking on form, Nick Pope starts, and I imagine Pope will start 2 of these games and Henderson the other. I think probably Henderson long term. I like Pope. I just think he's very reliable. He's very calm. He's been in good form. Distribution is a slight issue. But yeah, I think he'll go with Pickford.
And does Jack Grealish play a big part in the summer? I mean, there's Sancho, there's Sterling, there's Rashford, there's a lot Foden, as you mentioned, but does Jack Grealish?
I think there are 3 or 4 absolutely exceptional young talents in this country. I mean, Trent Alexander-Arnold isn't in the squad, and I think that's a slight indictment of Southgate's coaching ability and man management abilities, because I just think you work on him defensively. He's such a raw, brilliant talent. He's won a European Cup and a Premier League, work on him. But for me, Foden is the one who comes into midfield. If you're playing a 4-3-3, Southgate will be cautious. He'll probably play a double pivot of Henderson. He loves Henderson. He's so important for the team. He rallies them as well as being better technically. And he's got this huge, than people think, and he's got this huge stamina. I'm sure Declan Rice will start. Nice. I think you can put a Foden in there, and then you have your front 3 of Sterling, Rashford, and Kane in the middle.
Some talent there if you think about how that bench looks. And I think having 4 at the back with Stones, obviously this season has been fantastic for City, and at times with Cancelo playing all over, he's actually in a 2 as well. He's been really, really solid, to be fair. So
yeah, we got loads of right backs. Got so many right backs. I'm almost 11 right backs. So and Trippier can play on the left, he can play on the right. Kyle Walker, you could argue, is in there as a 3rd centre back as well, but I just don't like this. The 3rd centre back, I think it smacks of caution, but I think ultimately Southgate's probably a cautious manager.
Yeah. Cool. And I think last question, just so we can end on Arsenal. There's so many other topics I've got written down that we haven't, so we'll have to get you back to talk about we wanted to talk about sort of online abuse, some of the anti-racism messaging, gambling. I think we'll do that next time. But just briefly, you mentioned you interviewed Vinay Venkatesham, obviously the Arsenal CEO, about three months ago. What were your sort of views of him, and how do you think he'll sort of do in the top job at Arsenal?
A man of principle. I think you could tell that. Supremely intelligent, but it's he's in shark-infested waters, and just because you're very polite, that doesn't shield you from. I hope he's tough with Kroenke, because I think that. I worry about Kroenke. I've always had an issue with him. I think it's offensive that he doesn't communicate with the supporters enough. I know. Look, Jeremy Wilson, big mate of mine at the Telegraph, and I know he and Kroenke have done things through them. And
about 10 years ago, though. Now
so is it? Well,
it was ages. Yeah,
is that right? Well, sorry. He should be here. He should be sort of sitting in. In the seat wherever he is in Denver and talking to you, because you and your amazing supporters organisation and the Arsenal fans are the lifeblood of the club, and he's he absolutely owes you. And look, okay, I'm of a generation who remembers the Hill Woods and David Deans, and I think they did. Okay, they did respect the fans. I'm not sure Kroenke does. And I think he's got to be reminded, this coming back to where we started, this reset, to appreciate fans as people and as supporters and as just the heartbeat of the club, as well as paying customers.
Yeah. Well, Stan or Josh Kroenke, there's always a place on this AST Virtual. We would love to have you as a guest. Come and talk to us and come and talk to our members. Right.
They should do. They absolutely should do. I don't know any other walk of life, particularly when there's a commercial attachment to it, where the owners, the chairman of the company, whatever you want to call them, the power brokers, keep the supporters, the customers, clients, call whatever you want to be called, at arm's length. I think it's disrespectful. And again, it comes back to this reset. And I do think, coming back to my initial point, fans have to be more militant and demand to have this respect.
Yeah, and to be fair, we've had several conversations with Vinay Venkatesham, who's always been good with us, but hardly anything with Stan. We've had one with Josh, but not much else. So yeah, we'd love to have him here. Cool, Henry. Thank you for your time. We've gone over a little bit, but it was just fascinating to talk to you, and the fact that we've still got over 100 people still here who have been sitting there for an hour and a half shows obviously how much they enjoyed it as well. So, Henry, I'd like to thank you on behalf of all of our members here, all of our members that will watch it on the recording, and obviously us on the board of the trust. And yeah, keep up the good work. We'll speak to you soon. Hopefully, I'll see you at the Emirates. You know, you probably won't be covering Arsenal Brighton on the final day. There'll probably be stuff going on, but obviously next season and or maybe even the Euros. So thank you.
Akil, many thanks for that. And by the way, I got those programs. So if you want to, you got those 6 or 7 needy homes. Just send me the addresses and I'll put them in the post.
Yeah. Perfect. We'll sort them out. And I could see a little Rocky still there, I think, just behind you. So that's good to see. Good to see the little Rocky there. Yeah.
Great Rocky.
Yeah. Perfect. Cool, guys. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I think it's going to be the AST AGM next in April sometime, or maybe May. So we'll see you all then. Stay safe. You know, obviously, enjoy the England games. Arsenal, I think we play Liverpool next, don't we, in the league? So that's another big game at the Emirates, sadly, without us. But, oh well. Up the Arsenal. Stay safe. Thank you. Bye.